Hello there friends, and welcome to the annual nonsensical meandering that is Ken's favourite stuff from the past year in video games. 2018 was a year packed with some outstanding games, and having given my brain a little space to relax and ponder, I'm finally here to discuss exactly what it was that made me fall in love with each and every one of them. As per usual, I've whipped up 5 days worth of categories ranging across all aspects of what games brought to the table in 2018. This year we've got even more categories than normal because there are a ton of good games in 2018 and I couldn't bring myself to shut up about them. So there are going to be 5 categories per day up until day 5, when I'll be running down my 10 favourite games of the year, which has been among the hardest I've done in this recent run of densely packed years. As always, these are just my own personal picks, but I would love to hear all of your choices as well. Day 1 kicks things off with 2018's 2017 Game of the Year, Best New Character, Best Surprise, Best Writing and Best Opening. As ever, if you're very sensitive to spoilers, then you might want to keep an eye on the nominee images along the bottom to see what I'll be talking about, but I've kept the most explicitly spoiler-heavy categories to the end of each day, so you can always dip out early if needs be. This is already going to be way too long, so let's just get right into it with today's awards. (2018's 2017 Game of the Year).
I see you have made new friends.
Assassin's Creed Origins. I haven't really touched an Ass Creed game since 2013's Black Flag, but the somewhat reworking of the series for Origins, along with its ancient Egyptian setting, had me eager to go back. It was too big of a game to bring myself to tackle in late 2017 amongst everything else I had going on, but I spent a fair amount of time with Bayek & Co this year. Unfortunately, that also meant I didn't get around to Odyssey, which looks to be very much my thing as well, but blasting my way around Egypt certainly felt like the breath of fresh air the series needed after several years of slow stagnation.
Ingenious.
Fire Emblem Heroes. I said in last year's videos that I played Fire Emblem Heroes every single day since release, and while I'm not 100% certain I can make that claim again, I feel pretty confident saying I hit at least 360 days this past year. 2018 saw Insys really playing around with the formula, bringing us the likes of the large-scale Grand Conquest and base-attacking Ether Raid formats. It was also the year I really took the time to get into actually understanding how merging worked and started building out my hero's skill sets, and that vast depth combined with the fast-paced accessibility of the actual gameplay kept me coming back right through the year. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Link's first outing on the Switch was the first 3D Zelda that had truly grabbed me by both hands, and while I spent quite a lot of time with it in 2017, there was still a ton for me to seek in that vast open world throughout the last 12 months. I mostly kept this as a game to dip into whenever I was away from home, and to its credit, Breath of the Wild is incredibly easy to just jump straight back in and pick up where you left off, thanks to its relatively simple mechanics and acres of small distinct puzzle rooms and encounters which let you utilise those mechanics in all manner of different inventive ways. Tekken 7. It was such a delight to be fully back on board with Tekken again during 2017, and while I didn't get too deep into grinding my rank online or spending hours in practice mode this past year, I was constantly digging it back out for a few quick rounds with friends. For my money, Tekken has always been about the most approachable of all the major fighting game franchises, and that certainly proved to still be true here. Throw in the return of Tekken Bowl and a couple of unexpected guest characters alongside the announcement of several returning favourites during 2019, and I don't expect to stop playing Tekken 7 anytime soon. I've toyed with a lot of long investment free-to-play games over the past few years, but none of them have both gripped me for so long and remained so consistently enjoyable throughout that time as Fire Emblem Heroes has. On a base level, the core gameplay of Heroes is engaging enough to actually hold my focus, while the turn-based nature of it allows it to still fit into situations where my attention is primarily elsewhere. Investing the time in actually understanding skills and building out my characters brought much more nuance to the flow of combat, as it lets you get into some devious positional trickery which can let you deftly outmaneuver your foes. The new modes really help bring some more diversity to the playing field as well. Ether Raids allow players to set up a base loadout featuring several defensive structures which other players must then account for as they attempt to clear said base out. Grand Conquest take things in a completely different direction by ramping up the scale of the battle and bringing in 8-on-8 fights with constant reinforcements, which feels much closer in spirit to the mainline games without getting too far away from the core combat systems of Heroes. In addition to that, fun variants such as the rhythm-based tap battles and returning modes such as voting gauntlets and Tempest Trials meant there was always something to focus on, and it was so nice always having this game to hand throughout 2018. Best New Character. Madeline, Celeste. As someone who has dealt with anxiety and frequent uncertainty about their own abilities over the years, Madeline was an incredibly relatable protagonist to me. Initially, Madeline seems pretty determined to take on the world, but quickly she starts to doubt her capabilities or is thrust into uncomfortable situations that leave her panicked. While Madeline never encounters something she isn't physically capable of, there are several times where she needs help and support from those around her to carry on pushing forward. I found Madeline slowly coming to terms with her own internal struggles and accepting the parts of her she'd been trying to shut out incredibly powerful.
Exhale.
Atreus, God of War. Most of the characters who pop up during Kratos' first tour of Midgard and its adjacent realms have some real vibrant character to them, but at its heart, this is a story about his son Atreus and the journey the two of them share. Atreus behaves like a child might, one who's gone through more than most would at that age. He's traumatized and quiet, thrust into a world he doesn't feel ready for. When he gets angry or lashes out or becomes unbearable and full of himself, you can understand why. Oftentimes Atreus sucks, but he sucks in the ways that all kids suck, especially when they're overwhelmed and under pressure, and you can't help but want him to find some peace.
Your father is right, boy. You are far from ready.
JJ MacLeod, The Missing. JJ has also had to deal with plenty of trauma in her young life, and although her troubles are much more grounded in reality than those of the son of a god, they hit a lot closer to home as a result. JJ has a ton of charm and wit, but she still gets stressed and worried often. Her constant desire to help others and inclination to get involved in everything until she ends up burning out from overwork as a result are things I found incredibly familiar to some of my own experiences. And while the central conflict in her life isn't something which affects me directly, it was handled with such care and impact that I felt able to really empathise with everything JJ and others in similar situations to her have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Tsuyoshi Nagamo, Yakuza 6. Nagamo is the more brawn than brains captain of Onomichi's small-time Hirose family, whose fates intertwine with Kiryu when he wanders into Nagamo's regular drinking spot and inadvertently threatens his place as the big man on the scene. Despite his stubbornness, Kiryu sees Nagamo's good heart and steps up to save him when he falls foul of the bigger fish up the Yakuza food chain, and thus begins a beautiful friendship. Nagamo desperately seeking for Kiryu no Anaki's approval at every turn, and Kiryu reluctantly seeing a little of himself in this hard-headed beefcake with a heart of gold. God, I love this damn idiot. Yakuza 6 continues the series' long-running tradition of great characters, but while I could have picked any number of them for this list, Nagamo is definitely the real standout amongst the bunch. His rough and tumble, follow your heart, act first and think never approach definitely makes him feel like the country boy equivalent to long-running protagonist Kiryu, and it's charming watching this lovable fool bumble his way through proceedings with the best of intentions but nary a shred of consideration or self-preservation. As their adventure together progresses, we see Nagamo botch a stealth mission because he gets too hot, fall into despair at the plight of his loved ones, be wowed by the bright lights and pretty ladies of the big city, deal with startling revelations about some of his closest friends and the dark secrets of those he has always trusted most of all. In a way, Nagamo works as a little nods to Kiryu's origins, just as Kiryu's own story is coming to a close. But Nagamo has a distinct brand of charm to him that makes him a delight on his own merits as well. Sometimes he's just fantastic comic relief, and at others he's the kind of close friend Kiryu has been seeking ever since he and Nishiki went their separate ways back in the day. Best surprise. Astrobot Rescue Mission. I didn't expect 2018 to be the year I got into virtual reality, even a month or two before I actually did, and I certainly didn't expect a simple 3D platformer to be the medium's biggest selling point, but the buzz around Astrobot was just so high, and it ended up being the tipping point that got me on board. Even so, I was a little skeptical at just how good this seemingly modern day take on a Crash Bandicoot style of linear platformer could be until I played it for myself. The moment that first map materializes before your very eyes and the titular fella gives you a cheery wave and hops out of your controller, you're immediately a part of that world. Dragon Ball FighterZ. DBZ has always been ripe material for fighting games, yet past attempts to recreate the show have never really nailed that competitive fighting game feel. It shouldn't come as too great a surprise that Arc System works with the ones who pulled it off, but what really did impress me is just how lovingly FighterZ bathes in its source material. From the glorious high-def renditions of some of the anime's most recognisable moments through to the hyper-paced action, the smart use of mechanics such as power charging and instant transmissions, and the immense satisfaction of sending your foes careening through mountains, this is the closest you'll get to truly living out all of your Dragon Ball fantasies. God of War. Not being a huge fan of the old Kratos rage simulators, I watched with intrigue at the unveiling of a new, more considered approach to the God of War series, from both a thematic and gameplay perspective. It certainly appealed a little more to me, but my early impressions were still lukewarm, even during my own first few hours with the game. But while the narrative doesn't address all of its predecessor's issues, the faces you meet are certainly much more charming, and the combat, well, I wasn't sure about the combat until the moment I found myself involuntarily exclaiming at just how damn weighty and satisfying it all feels when things really kick into high gear, and you're firing on all cylinders. Monster Hunter World. Monster Hunter is always a series I'd respected from a distance, but I was always a little reluctant to jump in due to the franchise sticking primarily to handhelds and having to work within the limitations of that hardware. I still remember my jaw dropping when I clocked that this incredible looking E3 trailer was a full-fledged Monster Hunter game. Monster Hunter World is everything I'd always dreamt that the series might be, given the full potential of more powerful platforms, and it's so much more on top of that. Whether you're a long-time hunter or a complete newcomer, World is the truest realisation of the franchise's original pitch, with almost none of its prior compromises. When I first saw Astrobot in action, it wasn't immediately clear why everyone was speaking so highly of it. It seemed relatively charming, but a little simplistic and restricted to these very old school narrow linear levels. Furthermore, everyone was pitching it as PSVR's equivalent to a mainline Mario game, a franchise that has never truly clicked for me. And yet within mere minutes of going into the virtual space and seeing it for myself, I could already feel the biggest smile spreading across my face, and that just refused to go away. The bright colours, the bouncy tunes, the way levels fizzle into reality right in front of your very eyes. Astrobot's cheery wave, the other bots floating happily right over into your controller as he boots them your way. The physicality of smashing your head into obstacles and pinging footballs back at robots to knock them out. I could go on and on and on at just how finely honed every single aspect of Astrobot is to elicit these feelings of pure joy and happiness. In fact, the only real sadness I have from my time with Astrobot is that I've wrung out literally every single second of content it had to offer, and now I'm desperately hoping that we get more VR delights from Team Asobi in the future. Best Writing. God of War. God of War certainly hasn't been a series that's lived on the strength of its writing previously, but Sony Santa Monica have really stepped their game up. The interactions between Kratos and Atreus find the right blend of joshing, tension and caring, even if they do occasionally dip into the slightly generic territory of
"You must be less angry than I was, boy."
The rest of the cast, however, is sprinkled with delightful wit and charm to compensate for the protagonist's moodiness. Mimir is the real standout, but Dwarven blacksmith duo Brock and Sindri are great fun as well. I certainly didn't expect to find myself smirking so earnestly at a God of War game as I did on frequent occasion here.
That's really not a story.
The Missing. Most of The Missing's writing comes in the form of text messages between JJ and those around her, whether it be family, friends, classmates or teachers. And while it oscillates wildly between the incredibly ridiculous and the deadly serious, it almost never drops a beat. The sillier stuff gave me a ton of laugh out loud moments, but the more earnest heart-to-hearts and the darker discussions felt completely believable as well. White Owl's excellent use of the text message format and their outrageous chat stickers to really toy around with the pacing and flow of conversations brings every single discussion to life in the most entertaining, heart-wrenching and bizarre ways. Red Dead Redemption 2. Rockstar have always excelled at creating silly, more outrageous characters, but their ability to nail a more serious tone has always been pretty hit or miss. RDR2 marks a real step up in quality for a more grounded, somber story from them. That's not to say there isn't joy to be found here though. Some of the most memorable moments are those shared celebrations amongst members of camp where you catch little snippets of discussion and interaction between the various gang members. I found myself frequently wandering over to catch a little more backstory on someone, or even just for a quick hello. The main story stumbles a little back into old school Rockstar at times, but still manages to provide some truly special encounters along the way.
You prove you can handle yourself.
Yakuza 6. Yakuza is a series which has always finely balanced intimate character interactions with over-the-top tomfoolery, and 6 is no exception. It takes almost no time to fall in love with rural loudmouth Nagamo, and the ways in which he and his family shift tone with Kiryu as he wins their respect and then bonds with them over the course of their adventure does a good job of capturing the developing relationship of these people thrown together by circumstance. But Yakuza 6 also delivers on the silliness in spades, with a whole wealth of goofy side quests and encounters that are packed with some of the most laugh out loud moments of the whole year. Once again, Yakuza has managed to astound me, not just with how strong its writing is, but that it manages to sustain that quality across translation and localization without it ever becoming detached from how quintessentially rooted in Japanese culture the series is. The only real concession they make here is their use of anarchy, a term integral to Nagamo and Kiryu's relationship which doesn't have a perfect English equivalent. Yakuza 6's dialogue constantly kept me on tenterhooks throughout the story, with so much high tension where things are clearly moments from serious escalation, from the early scenes where Kiryu interrogates Sugai and Sumaya, through to the introduction of flamboyant sadist Han Jun-gi. The writing really captures the terrifying vibe of polite menace which comes with powerful gang members facing off with one another. On the other side of things, the humour is top-notch too, with tons of silly wordplay and bizarre scenarios such as Kiryu attempting to deliver a child-friendly speech whilst dressed as Onomichi's traditional orange-headed town mascot. Whether I was laughing, crying, tensing up or gasping in disbelief, few games dragged me quite so far around the whole emotional spectrum with such success as Yakuza 6 managed this year. Best Opening. Okay, just as a quick heads up, I'm about to talk about the opening scenes of God of War, The Missing, Return of the Obra Dinn and Yakuza 6. Obviously I'll be keeping to stuff right near the start of each game, but there are a couple of big reveals in here, so if you're about to play any of these then now's the time to drop out. For everyone else, onwards we go. God of War. God of War's slow, sombre opening is a dramatic shift from the games of old, with Kratos and Atreus out building a pyre for Atreus' recently deceased mother, and then Kratos taking Atreus hunting to try and prepare him for their impending trip out into the wilderness. Then, all of a sudden, things kick into overdrive with a crash and a knock, and a mysterious bearded stranger appears on their door claiming to know who and what they are. Cue an incredible, scenery-shattering, Dragon Ball-esque fistfight which reminds you exactly who Kratos once was, whilst also suggesting that it isn't just his son who might not be ready for the journey ahead. The Missing.
JJ.
Things start off so well, with JJ and Emily sharing a tender moment under a starlit night, but when JJ awakens to find Emily absent and a storm brewing, she sets out to find her. This atmospheric search leads JJ to wander out into a field of flowers where a nearby lightning strike causes a devastating accident, and then things get real weird real fast. A dear doctor, an astonishing regeneration that would make the Mortal Kombat cast proud, and then the texts start coming in from JJ's stuffed animal. It's a heck of an opening, made all the better knowing that the game successfully pays off on every one of these aspects down the line. Return of the Obra Dinn. Armed with only a letter of instruction, a mysterious pocket watch and a few words exchanged with a salty old sea dog, you find yourself floating up against the hull of the abandoned Obra Dinn. An eerie silence fills the moonlit night, punctuated only by the splashes and creaks of the old ship and your footsteps clacking across the wooden deck. You step up to the decomposing body outside the captain's quarters, flip open the pocket watch and... bang! Suddenly you're right there, a pistol discharging in your face. Or rather, the face of the unfortunate soul now standing behind you. Yakuza 6. There's a good amount of optional preamble at the start of Yakuza 6 which does a decent job of catching you up to speed on the events of the previous games. But things really kick into gear when a freshly released Kiryu arrives back at the Morning Glory orphanage to the surprise of the kids. Seeing their warm reactions to his return brought an instant smile to my face, only for their joy to give way to concern when they realise that Haruka isn't anywhere to be found. And so Kiryu arrives back in Kamurocho, the city that has been such a core part of his story and the series for decades, and sets out one more time in search of his daughter. When it comes to kicking things off with a bang, Obra Dinn doesn't hesitate in doing so quite literally. Quickly you realise that your mystery device has transported you to the moment of this person's untimely demise, but just who could they be? Time to go to work. As you wander around you spot extra little details such as a mystery man dashing over the stern. Then as you head into the captain's quarters, this story, which you're told up front is the ending of the Obra Dinn's sad tale, begins to unfold. This, then, is Captain Robert Witterell's last stand. Having shot a man you determined to be his trusted first mate William, Robert fights off the other potential mutineer and even that mystery man from earlier, who, it transpires, was attempting an elaborate flanking manoeuvre, before dear Robert says his final words and takes his own life. So far, your job of identifying the happening seems relatively straightforward, but what could have happened to Robert's wife who lays dead beside him? The watch ticks. You stand before Abigail's final moments and... This is going to take quite some explaining to the higher-ups. And that wraps up the first day of awards. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, a like would be greatly appreciated, and I would love to hear what you would have chosen in the comments down below. Come back tomorrow for more awards, including Best Looking, Best Cast, Best Music, Best Mission or Sequence, and the hotly contested Best Chat stickers. I've been Ken, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers!